Hello everyone, so today we're going to be talking about the Keynesian multiplier effect. So our learning objectives for today are to explain what is meant by the multiplier effect, to diagrammatically represent and analyse the effect of the multiplier on AD, to evaluate the limitations of the multiplier effect, and we're going to be learning how to use the multiplier as an effective evaluation of several government policies. Okay, so to start off, let's have a look at some past paper multiple choice questions. Now this is always a kind of warm-up section of the A-level exam, so usually they're fairly straightforward and you can easily answer them in a couple of seconds. So don't wait for me to give you the answer. Write down the answer on a bit of paper, or at least think about what the correct answer is. Okay, here we go. So in a circular flow of income model, which of the following of these is considered to be an injection? Is it consumer spending, government spending, imports, or wages? Okay, it's B, government spending. Next, which of the following is an objective of the UK government's macroeconomic policy? Is it a fall in the money supply? Is it a stable labour force? Is it an increase in real GDP per head? Or is it low interest rates? Okay, it's C, an increase in real GDP per head. Changes are regularly made to weights used in the UK Consumer Price Index. Now remember, that's a basket of goods, a weighted basket of goods. This means that the index takes into account changes in month-to-month increase in general price level, spending patterns throughout the economy, the growth of real output in the economy, or is it total spending on all domestic goods and services? Okay, it's B, spending patterns throughout the economy. Changes in real GDP are used to measure, is it A, inflation, B, the level of unemployment, C, economic growth, or D, the distribution of income? C, economic growth. Okay, so the following table shows how the index of GDP and the index of population have changed between the years 2011 and 2015. So which of the following can be inferred from the data above? The population was higher than GDP in 2011. Between 2011 and 2013, GDP grew by 8%, whereas the population grew by 3%. There was no growth in GDP per capita between 2013 and 2015. And money GDP increased more than real GDP between 2011 and 2015. Which one is it? It's C, there's no growth in GDP per capita between 2013 and 2015. Okay, so you can see that between the figures. In 2013, the GDP is 100, population is 100. That's the base year. And in 2015, we've got the GDP is 103 and the population is 103. Okay, next one. All things being equal, an increase in the exchange rate of the pound against other currencies due to a rise in interest rates is most likely to cause an increase in the UK's surplus in the current account of the balance of payments, price of imported goods, level of unemployment, and rate of economic growth. Okay, and it's C, the level of unemployment. Okay, here's the graph of the inflation rate between the years 1990 and 2008. So from the graph here, so 1990, the inflation rate is 16%. In 2008, it's around 2%. So From this, we can surmise that the average prices were A, lower than 2008 than 1990, B, fell sharply from 1990 to 1992, C, increased each year from 1990 to 2008, and D, were lowest in 2003. Okay, it's C, which is increased each year from 1990 to 2008. Now, the reason for that is, of course, if you look at the inflation rate is always positive, which means that prices are going up year on year. Having a decrease in the percentage change of inflation rate does not necessarily mean that prices are going down. They're still increasing over time, whether it's 1% or 16%. Okay, and I've put on the answer for that accidentally. So if you have a look at these questions and then you're something you're not sure about, then that means that you've got to go back and have a look and review some of that material. But today we'll move on and have a wee look at a very important area in economics, which is the Keynesian multiplier. So this comes from Keynes's general theory of employment, interest and money. And here's a very famous quote from Keynes, and it's something that a lot of us economists based our lessons around. Any increase in injections into the economy, consumer spending, investment spending, government expenditure or exports, remember that's the formula, C plus I plus G plus X minus M, would lead to a proportionally bigger increase in national income. Okay, so today we're going to be breaking that down and having a look at how that works in real life. So here are three really famous quotes from Keynes. So there's the first one we just talked about. The second one person's spending is another person's income. Now everyone knows that. If I said that to any random person in the street, it's fairly obvious. One person's spending is another person's income, but we'll go into more detail about how that's maybe not that immediately obvious. And the other famous quote, of course, from the book is, in the long run, we are all dead. And that's in response to the neoclassical economists who argue that if you leave the economy to itself, then eventually prices will fall, wages will fall, and then there'll be an increase in employment in the long run, and there'll be a sort of readjustment towards full employment. Keynes argued, of course, that there's no point in talking about the long run, because in the long run we're all dead, and it doesn't matter for the worker, the consumer, if you tell him, oh, things will get better in 30 years. That makes no difference for me now. So, the definition of the multiplier. The multiplier is the ratio of a change in the equilibrium real income to an autonomous change that is brought about. It is defined by 1 divided by the marginal propensity for withdrawals. There can be positive and negative multipliers that can affect aggregate demand and GDP. In other words, any injection into the circular flow of income will result in a much larger increase in output than the original injection. So we'll maybe break this down and make it a little bit more simple. So the multiplier effect essentially occurs when the initial change in aggregate demand has a much greater final impact on GDP. Okay, it comes about because injections of new demand for goods and services into the circular flow of income stimulates further rounds of spending. And this is where this quote is important. The one person's spending is another person's income. Now you can see this argument being used for policies such as trickle-down economics. In other words, you cut taxes for the richest in society, and the logic goes that they will spend more money, and therefore more people will be employed. They'll invest more people will be employed, and then they will again spend more money in the economy. They will buy extra goods, and then it'll kind of have this ripple effect on the economy. So it's used to justify a whole range of different policies. So the multiplier can affect when any increase in the components of aggregate demand initially increases due to an injection, such as government spending, investments, or an increase in exports. So we'll have a wee look at this in terms of an example. Here is an injection. So say, for example, the government builds a new swimming pool, or the Scottish example, they build the hydro in Glasgow, or any number of government spending initiatives. So with this example, you inject money into buying a swimming pool and constructing a swimming pool. Okay, so all the builders and people who work in the swimming pool, they have the money. They will then go out and spend it on retail. They may go to the mall, they may go to restaurants, they may go to cafes, etc. So there goes the ripple. That will lead to an increase in profits for businesses. An increase in profits of business should lead to higher wages for their employees. They're then going to go out and spend money in other sectors. It could be going to a chocolate shop, could be going on a holiday, could be a whole bunch, buying more takeaways. It could be a range of different activities. Okay, so you can see there that the initial injection in the swimming pool has led to a ripple effect throughout the economy and has improved the business of a whole bunch of seemingly unrelated businesses. Okay, so we'll have a wee look at this. There's a government document about construction. So the construction contributes nearly 90 billion to the UK economy. Now, this figure is not the final increase in national income, as the multiplier effect would lead to a much larger effect on national income. So you can see here from construction that there are 2.9 million jobs filled in the construction industry, and which is 10% of all jobs. So lots and lots of people work in a related industry to construction. They're of course using their income to spend elsewhere in the economy, and then again, as I said before, it keeps rippling out and creating that multiplier effect. Equally, if we have a wee look at tourism, so you've got tourists coming to your country. They then spend money on transportation, they spend money on maybe going to the campgrounds, lodgings, hotels, sports arenas, amusement parks, entertainment. They're going to be buying lots of things. And then this again has this ripple effect throughout the economy, leading to increased sales, increased employment, increased wages, and increased taxes. Now you can see this in many, many different cities around the world. I live in Edinburgh, and every year we have the Fringe Festival, and the city has many, many thousands of people who come here to enjoy entertainment and go to restaurants and go to and enjoy many different types of events, which leads to an increase in income, an increase in employment, and an overall increase in income for the city. So there we go. There's tourism. That creates a very positive multiplier, and this is why, of course, many cities seek to create tourist traps or tourist things. Okay, so Equally, we've got here the same thing again. We've got the direct effects, but then we've also got the indirect effects of consumer behaviour. Now, on the other side, we've got the other idea of what's called the paradox of thrift. So we're not talking about spending anymore. We're talking about saving. Now, we're often told that saving is a great thing and we should all be saving for the future. However, what happens if everyone starts to save in the economy? Okay, so the Keynesian idea of the paradox of thrift states that an increase in autonomous savings leads to a decrease in aggregate demand and thus a decrease in GDP, which then, of course, leads to less total saving in the economy. So basically, the paradox is that total savings may fall because individuals are attempting to increase their savings. So if you're not spending your money, you're saving it. You've got two choices in what you do with your money. You can spend it or you can save it. Now, if everyone saves it, then they are not spending money in the economy. And if we have a wee look at the graph below, we've got the 2009 financial crisis, which you have got in the blue line, you've got consumer spending, which sharply fell due to falling consumer confidence. And then you have an increase in savings at the same time. And that contributed, of course, to a deepening of the financial crisis and a fall in AD. This is what Keynes would have called a negative multiplier. So we'll have a look at this on a diagram. So I think my head is covering the price level axis. So there we've got the initial AD. We'll go back to that example of the government deciding to build a swimming pool. This will cause an increase in AD. So of course, a key component of AD is G. So here you can see the impact on G. However, the Keynesian multiplier effect theory says that there will be additional rounds of spending, as we discussed a minute ago. Builders, architects, plumbers will all receive additional income from the building of the school, which they will then spend in shops. These shops and their employees in turn will have this additional income. They will then increase the income of others, and so on and so on. This further spending, which is part of AD under C, consumer spending, and I, investment, shifts the aggregate demand curve even further from A2 to A3. So if you want to show the multiplier on a diagram, you can draw it like that. You can also use this diagram, of course, to say that, to argue that an increase in fiscal policy will lead to inflationary pressures on the economy, as there's quite a large difference in price level between P2 and P3. So let's prove this numerically. Now, this is a really important part of learning about the multiplier. You need to know this for IB and the A level. Now, the multiplier is calculated through 1 divided by the marginal propensity to withdraw. Okay, the change in national income equals the initial injection times 1 divided by the marginal propensity to withdraw. And we'll talk about that in a minute, break that down and see what it looks like and do some practice. Injections into our circular flow of income includes increase in exports, increase in government spending, and increase in investment. And the marginal propensity to withdraw stands for this marginal propensity to withdraw. This is the proportion of any extra income that we receive, that we save, that we spend on imports, or that we spend on taxes. This is also known as leakages in the circular flow. So we'll take an imaginary economy. So we've got here, we've got Econland. Okay, so what I've done is I've put here the multiplier, and I've broken the economy down into 5 sectors or people. This could be an economy of just 5 people. It would be the same concept. And we've got the pounds received. So imagine there is an injection into the economy of 6,400, and we've got a 0.5 marginal propensity to consume here, which means that I'm going to be spending 50% of my income. So we could fill that along here into the spent 3,200. I'm going to be taxed 20%, which is 1,280. I'm going to spend 20% on imported goods, which again, 1,280. Keep it simple. And I'm going to save 10% of my income, which is 640. So now imagine there's an injection of 6,040. How would that look for the rest of the economy? And what would happen if we kept looking at how the money was spent further down the line? Now you can do this as a quick activity. Just fill in the boxes and we shall see what happens. So fill in the pounds received column down to the total. Okay, you can pause it there. Okay, so here we go. So we've got the 6 out. So person 1 has received or sector 1, maybe it's the NHS, maybe it's it could be the eat out to help out, restaurants. The government's spending a lot of money on helping out restaurants. So you get this extra cash. For person 1 gets the 6,400. He then spends it on person 2 or sector 2. They receive 3,200 and they spend it again on person 3, person 4 and person 5. Now what you will notice is that the total pounds received is 12,400. Okay. And what is spent, of course, is 6,200. The total tax is 2,480, imports 2,480, and savings 1,240. Now this is the multiplier in action. So the increase in spending initially 6,400 has led to a total increase of GDP of 12,400. Okay, so have a wee look at that diagram. It should be quite. Have a look at this chart. It's quite interesting. So let's have a wee look at the leakages. So here's the multiplier effect. So we've got the multiplier, 1 divided by 1 minus marginal propensity to consume, or it's 1 divided by marginal propensity to save, marginal propensity to tax, and marginal propensity to import, which overall is 1 divided by the marginal propensity to withdraw. Okay, that should make a lot of sense. So as I said before, so the first formula, 1 divided by the 1 minus the marginal propensity to consume. Obviously, you've only got 2 choices, as I said. You can consume or you can save. That's why it's 1 minus the marginal propensity to consume. And the withdrawals in the economy are savings, taxes, and imports. So that's why there's the middle formula exists. And finally, it's the easiest one, 1 divided by the marginal propensity to withdraw. So again, as I said, there's the quote again: any increase in injections into the economy would lead to a proportionally bigger increase in national income. You can see that from the activity we just did. The reverse, the negative multiplier effect, occurs when leakages increase. Any leakage will lead to a proportionally larger fall in national income than the initial leakage. Another good evaluation point. So let's have a wee look at this. So we've got the marginal propensity to withdraw. That's 0.25. What is the multiplier? Okay, so how much is the injection going to have an effect on the economy? Okay, so in this case, we'll just do the simple formula again. 1 divided by the marginal propensity to withdraw, that's 1 divided by 0.25, that's 4. So the multiplier is 4. So any injection into the economy will result in an increase in aggregate demand of 4. Now, let's try this one. Okay, so get a bit of paper, try this one out. The marginal propensity to withdraw now is 0.2, and the government injects 2 billion into the economy. How much will the economy grow by? Okay, so if the government injects 2 billion into the economy, then we can easily do that calculation. 1 divided by 0.2, which is 5. So the 2 billion invested will lead to a fivefold increase in AD. So that 2 billion times 5 is 10 billion. Okay, so I would like you to try these now. So pause it there and go through some of these questions, and I'll go through the answers once you've finished. Okay, so if the UK exports increase by 1 billion and the marginal propensity to withdraw is 0.5, what's going to be the increase in national income? Okay, if the government spending increased by 20 million and the marginal propensity to withdraw was 0.8, what is going to be the change in national income? And what would happen if the government taxation increases by 500 million, assuming that the with marginal propensity to withdraw is 0.4? Give that a go. So the first one, if exports increase by 1 billion and the marginal propensity to withdraw is 1.5, you can easily figure out that the multiplier is 2, 1 divided by 0.5. So 2 times 1 billion would be 2 billion. Okay. If the government spending increased by 20 million and the marginal propensity to withdraw was 0.8, calculate the change in national income. So 1 divided by 0.8 is 1.25. 1.25 times 20 million is 25 million. And what would happen if the government taxes increased by 500 million and the marginal propensity to withdraw is 0.4? So 1 divided by 0.4 is 2.5. 2.5 times 500 million is 1,250 million pounds. Okay, so fairly straightforward. I think it's a really easy calculation to do to figure out the multiplier, but it comes up almost every year on the macro paper too. And if you're doing IB, it comes up very regularly on paper 3, but it's a really easy and useful calculation. So here's 2 scenarios for you. So give this a go, and hopefully by the end of this you'll be very confident in your use of the multiplier calculation. So the first one, the government has increased taxation by 1 billion. What will happen to the economy as a result of this? Now in this case we've got the marginal propensity to tax 0.2, propensity to save 0.1, and propensity to import is 0.3. And in scenario 2 we've got a 5 billion injection into infrastructure. What will happen to this in the scenario where the propensity to tax is 0.1, propensity to save is 0.05, and the propensity to import is 0.1? Okay, so pause it there and give these calculations a go. So nice and easy. So you add them all together, and then you've got the marginal propensity to withdraw. In this case, 0.2 plus 0.1 plus 0.3 is 0.6, so it's 1 divided by 0.6, which is 1.667. And of course, because taxation is a leakage, then you've got negative 1 times 1.667, which is negative 666 billion. Okay, so hopefully that makes a wee bit of sense. You can just write that as 1.667 billion. Okay. The next one, in scenario 2, they've injected 5 billion into the economy. So we add them together again. 0.1 plus 0.05 plus 0.1 is 0.25. So 1 divided by 0.25 is 4. So 4 times 5 billion is 20 billion. Okay, really straightforward calculation. So with your A-level or your IB, when a question involves a change in injections or leakages, this concept can be used to explain the final impact on national income. So it's a really good argument for fiscal policy, any kind of fiscal policy, cutting taxes or increasing government spending. It's a really, really good argument. Equally, if you're talking about austerity, you can go into the negative multiplier effect. So it's a really good one to use. It's really, the examiners really love seeing you discuss the multiplier in your answer. And of course, each group in an economy has very different multipliers. So you can also think of that as well. And we've all got different propensities as well to save or to buy imports or these kind of things. If you're a very rich individual, then your propensities to save are probably higher than if you were from a much lower income group. Equally, your propensity to import or buy imported goods is probably a lot higher as well. So the job of governments should be to try to calculate the multiplier effectively and manage spending based on those types of multipliers. And the multiplier effect will be different in different parts of the world and different parts of the UK. You know, the propensities to save in some cultures is much higher than in other cultures. Okay, so moving on, we can evaluate this multiplier effect. So the marginal propensity to consume, that's MPC. That's how much, as we've talked about, that's how much of an additional pound you consume. When the figure is low, then if you've got a very low marginal propensity to consume, then each round of spending will be less. Therefore, when spending is low, the income for the next person will be lower. Now think about the COVID-19 crisis with massive cuts in spending across the economy. People can't go out and go to restaurants, can't go to bars, can't go to shops. So of course the chances to the opportunity to spend your money is much smaller. That will then lead to that ripple effect in the economy, people losing their jobs, which leads to them not spending money in the economy, which leads to other people not spending money in the economy, and it just keeps rippling out. And that's really a key insight behind this. And in a way, that's why governments will introduce programs to try and stabilise that. That's why the furlough scheme exists. It's to stabilise spending. That's why welfare programs exist. That's why pensions exist, because you want to maintain stable spending. Okay. And the marginal propensity to import is very important, especially for developing countries as well. So if people have a high marginal propensity to import, then the money won't have a huge effect on your economy if you're spending lots of money on goods produced overseas. Of course, it will have a little bit of a effect on the economy in the service sector, perhaps. Say if you're buying a foreign car, then yes, there's car showrooms here and people are employed there, but there won't be that. But then that is a leakage, and the money will go to another economy. So, there are, of course, many rounds of expenditure in the economy. It's a very complex thing, the multiplier, and it's really difficult to measure, and it's really difficult to see the effects of different policies and whether or not they are effective. So it's so difficult to measure. That's why it's often debated over. Like the effects of austerity, did it have a negative multiplier effect on the economy? Some people would argue that it didn't. It was other effects that had an effect on the economy. You know, these kind of debates, Scott. You know, should you give tax breaks to the rich? Should you cut corporation taxes? Should you increase benefits? Should you increase pensions? All of those kind of things, really difficult to measure the actual effect on the economy. Should you increase public sector pay? That's another one. The government is one of the biggest employers in the economy. Should you increase public sector pay? Should you keep it the same? Or should you have public sector pay cuts? And what would be the effect on the economy? It's impossible. It's really difficult to measure. And the Keynesian idea of animal spirits, about how consumers and people, human beings, behave in quite an unpredictable way, about our consumer confidence, how much that has an effect on the economy, and how can you predict when there will be a fall in consumer confidence or an increase in consumer confidence. It's very difficult to manage, extremely difficult to manage. So also, we're talking in hypotheticals with the multiplier effect. You're trying to consider spending which would otherwise not have taken place without this injection. So it's very difficult to see this ripple effect on the economy and how an increase in spending somewhere, because it may have completely unpredictable effects. For example, I mean, Japan is a good example of where the government has in the past followed Keynesian logic and massively increased fiscal policy, expansionary fiscal policy, massive increases in government spending, but the actual effect on the economy has been not as effective as the government would have liked. So they overestimated the multiplier effect. So it's not an exact science. If it was an exact science, then the economy would be perfect all the time and we would know exactly where to invest our money. But we can't, because we're all human beings and human beings are unpredictable, as are world events and external shocks. So the full benefits of the multiplier effect are unable to be felt in the economy when the economy is very close to full employment. In the inelastic section of the economy, so if the economy is really close to full employment and a government gets elected on the basis of increase in government spending, then any increase in government spending or decrease in taxes will only lead to inflation and won't have an effect on GDP. Okay, so that's another key evaluation of the multiplier effect. It doesn't work at certain times in the economy. So now I'd like you to think about this, the COVID-19 crisis. Should the UK government attempt to boost aggregate demand through government spending? Okay, now just think about that for a second. Maybe pause it and just think, should they boost aggregate demand by government spending? Okay, and then the little cartoon down there is quite good. I think. All right, so just to wrap up here, again, this question will be different on who, depends on your politics. Everyone has different ideas about government spending and should it be used to increase aggregate demand, or should you cut taxes and where should you cut taxes? So it's such a multifaceted argument. Should you employ supply side policies? Should you let the central bank do all the work by decreasing interest rates, printing money, that kind of thing? And then this cartoon, I think, is getting at maybe where the multiplier effect does not have a huge effect on the economy, so an increase in spending is wasted. So there's another little point. So let's have a look at this. So to wrap up, let's have a look at some multiple choice questions. See if you understand. So write down the answer on your pad of paper. So the multiplier effect is of an increase in investment in an economy is it A, an increase in productive capacity? Is it B, a larger increase in national income than investment? C, an increase in the underlying trend of growth? And D, the movement of the economy from recession to a boom. So which one is it? It is B, a larger increase in national income than in investments. Okay, that's a sort of clumsy way of saying the Keynesian quote that I said earlier. An increase in an economy, the government reduced its spending by 4 billion. At the same time, exports rose by 20 billion. As a result of these changes, national income has rose by 20 billion. The size of the multiplier is, so you could probably, it's a wee calculation. Give it a go. Okay, so the in this case, the size of the multiplier is 1.25. Okay, so remember, exports, what are they? They're an injection. What's government has reduced its spending by 4 billion. Okay, so think about that. So yeah, that's also a leakage. It's the next one. Oh yeah, so that's it. So the multiplier, here's what we talked about today. So the multiplier ratio, the multiplier process, the effects of the multiplier in the economy, and understanding the marginal propensities and their effects on the multiplier. Okay, so we've talked about the marginal propensity to consume, the marginal propensity to save, the marginal propensity to tax, and the marginal propensity to import. Okay, and we've done the calculations, and we have talked about the significance of the multiplier on AD. Okay, so that's my very quick recap of the multiplier effect and how to calculate it. Hopefully that made sense. It's fairly simple, and it's a really, really useful argument, calculation, and evaluation point. Okay, thank you very much.